The warning sirens echoed through the empty corridors of Research Station Beta 17, their harsh wail breaking the usual quiet of deep space. Jack Thompson looked up from his computer screen, where columns of data about alien species scrolled endlessly. After 3 years on this remote station, he knew every alarm and its meaning. This one was new. Warning: Class A predatory species detected in Sector 4. All personnel must evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. The station's AI repeated the message in 5 different alien languages. Jack's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the sensor data. His heart raced with excitement rather than fear. As the station's lead xenobiologist, every new species was a chance to learn something extraordinary. The readings made him pause. They were off the charts. The main screen lit up with an incoming transmission. A tall, blue-skinned alien appeared, its multiple eyes wide with concern. "Human Thompson, you must leave now. A Night Stalker approaches your sector." Administrator Blue, what exactly is a Night Stalker? Jack asked, already pulling up the xenobiology database. To his surprise, the entry was mostly blank, marked with danger warnings. "They are death itself." Blue's translator crackled with static. "Every encounter with their kind has ended in destruction. The mining colony in Sector 7 lost 50 workers last cycle. The research station in Sector 12 vanished completely." Jack leaned forward, fascinated. "But what are they? Predators? Sentient beings?" "Both. Neither. It doesn't matter." Blue's color darkened with frustration. "The Council orders immediate evacuation. Your escape pod is ready. Leave everything behind." The station shook slightly. Something large had docked or attached itself to the outer hull. The lights flickered, and Jack heard the distant sound of metal groaning. "Thompson, your pod. Now." Blue was practically shouting. Jack looked at his life's work spread across the lab. Samples from 100 worlds, research that could help humanity understand its place in the galaxy. How long until it breaks through the hull? Minutes, maybe less. This is no time for human curiosity. But Jack was already moving, not toward the escape pods, but deeper into the station. He grabbed his emergency pack, always ready, always stocked, and his research tablet. "I'm staying." "Impossible. You'll die." Blue's multiple eyes blinked rapidly. "Maybe," Jack said, checking the station's security feeds. "Or maybe we'll learn something new. Humanity didn't get to the stars by running from the unknown. This is beyond foolish. It is suicide." Jack smiled, thinking of all the times in human history when people had said the same thing about exploring the unknown. "Administrator, please send me everything you have on the Night Stalkers. Every scrap of data, every rumor, every story. If I'm going to die, I'd at least like to know what's killing me." The station shook again, harder this time. "You leave me no choice but to log this as a death by willful ignorance," Blue said, his color now almost purple with anger and fear. "May your gods protect you, Human Thompson." The screen went dark. Jack was alone. He worked quickly, setting up cameras throughout the station, activating every sensor he could think of. The xenobiology lab would be his fortress, reinforced walls, multiple exits, and all his equipment within reach. Whatever this Night Stalker was, he would document everything until the very end. The station's AI spoke again, its voice oddly calm. "Hull breach detected in Sector 4B. Emergency containment protocols activated. Life support stable." Jack checked the security feeds. The cameras in Sector 4B showed only darkness, as if something was absorbing all the light. He switched to thermal imaging. The feed showed a massive heat signature, unlike anything he'd ever seen. It moved with impossible grace for its size, flowing through the station like living smoke. "Well," Jack muttered, setting up his final camera, "either I'm about to make the discovery of the century, or I'm about to become a cautionary tale about human stubbornness." He heard something moving in the corridor outside his lab. a sound like silk sliding over metal. Then silence. Jack Thompson, xenobiologist, took a deep breath and turned toward the door. It was time to meet the galaxy's most feared predator face to face. The darkness moved like water through the station's corridor, seeping under the lab door in impossible ways. Jack stood his ground, heart pounding but hands steady as he recorded everything on his tablet. The security feeds showed the creature's heat signature growing larger, filling the entire corridor outside. Then it stopped. For several long moments, nothing happened. The only sound was the soft hum of the station's life support systems and Jack's own breathing. He watched as the darkness retreated from under the door, gathering itself into a more solid form. A gentle tap echoed through the lab, then another, and another. Jack blinked in surprise. The galaxy's most lethal predator was knocking. "Well, that's unexpected," he muttered, checking his sensors. The creature's heat signature had changed, becoming more concentrated. It was no longer trying to seep through the cracks. Instead, it waited. Making what might have been the bravest or stupidest decision of his life, Jack pressed the door control. "Come in," he said, voice surprisingly steady. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The darkness flowed into the room, but not as the terrifying mass he'd expected. Instead, it condensed into a form about the size of a large earth tiger. Its body seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an outline of pure shadow with subtle shifts of darker patterns moving across its surface. Two eyes opened, glowing with a deep purple light. They fixed on Jack with unmistakable intelligence. "Hello," Jack said softly. "I'm Jack Thompson. Welcome to Research Station Beta 17. The creature's head tilted slightly, reminding Jack of a curious dog. It made no aggressive moves, instead looking around the lab with apparent interest. Its eyes lingered on the various specimens and equipment. Jack slowly moved to his desk, never turning his back to the visitor. "I'm going to sit down, if that's okay." He narrated his actions, remembering his training with dangerous Earth predators. The creature watched but made no move to stop him. Once seated, Jack started taking notes. Subject appears to have full control over its form. Currently choosing a quadrupedal shape, roughly 2 meters in length. Shows signs of intelligence and curiosity rather than hunting behavior. The Night Stalker's head snapped toward him at the sound of typing. It moved closer, its movement completely silent. Jack held his breath, but kept typing. "Subject is approaching my position. Movement is entirely soundless. The light-absorbing effect seems to be voluntary, as it's now maintaining a distinct shape rather than the fluid form seen earlier." The creature reached his desk and stretched its neck to look at the tablet's screen. Its face was barely 30 centimeters from Jack's own. This close, he could see that what looked like solid darkness was actually millions of tiny scales, each one absorbing light individually. "Fascinating," Jack whispered. "You're not just avoiding light. You're controlling it somehow." The Night Stalker made a sound then, something between a purr and a hum. The noise had an odd harmonic quality that made the air vibrate. To Jack's amazement, the patterns on its skin began to shift, creating swirling designs that seemed to respond to the sound. "You're trying to communicate," Jack realized. He quickly pulled up a spectrum analyzer on his tablet. The creature's hum contained multiple frequencies, far more complex than simple animal sounds. The Night Stalker stopped humming and looked at the wave patterns on the screen. Then, deliberately, it produced another sound. The patterns were different but clearly structured. Jack laughed softly. "Administrator Blue called you death itself. But you're something much more interesting, aren't you?" The creature's eyes seemed to brighten slightly. It moved back, giving Jack space, then used its control over light to create a simple pattern in the air. 3 floating circles arranged in a triangle. "Well," Jack said, smiling as he started a new notes file, "I think this is the beginning of a very interesting friendship." The Night Stalker's scales rippled in what might have been agreement, and for the first time in galactic history, a human, and the most feared predator in known space began to truly communicate. The urgent message flashed on Jack's screen for the third time that day. The Galactic Council's seal pulsed an angry red, demanding his immediate attention. With a sigh, he accepted the call. Human Thompson. Administrator Blue's face filled the screen, all four eyes blinking rapidly in distress. You were ordered to evacuate 6 days ago. Why do we still detect life signs on that station? Jack glanced at the Night Stalker, who was currently curled up in the corner of his lab, creating complex light patterns on the ceiling. He'd named it Nova, after its ability to manipulate light and shadow. I'm conducting vital research, Jack replied calmly. The Night Stalker species is not what we thought. Not what we. Blue's skin rippled in shock. It's still there. You've survived 6 days with that monster. As if understanding it was being discussed, Nova lifted its head and made a series of harmonic sounds. The analyzer on Jack's tablet captured the frequencies, adding to his growing database of their communication attempts. Nova is not a monster, Jack said firmly. Look. He turned the camera to show Nova, who obligingly created a beautiful display of floating light patterns like a dancing aurora. Blue screamed. The sound was so high-pitched it made Jack's equipment crackle. It's hunting you, playing with its food. This is what they do. Jack was about to argue when he noticed something odd about Nova's movement. The creature was favoring its right side, the patterns of its scales slightly disrupted along its flank. I'll have to call you back. Administrator, Jack said, ending the transmission despite Blue's protests. He approached Nova carefully. Hey there, friend. Are you hurt? Nova's eyes dimmed slightly, and it shifted its form, becoming more transparent. Through the semi-transparent scales, Jack could see what looked like a piece of space debris embedded deep in the creature's side. The wound was hidden by Nova's light-bending abilities, but now that Jack knew to look for it, he could see the injury was serious. That's why you came here, isn't it? Jack realized. You weren't hunting. You were looking for help. Nova created a pattern of slow, pulsing lights that Jack had come to associate with agreement. The creature had been learning human communication as quickly as Jack was learning its light language. I need to remove that debris, Jack said, pointing to the injury. Will you let me help? Nova watched him for a long moment, then slowly stretched out, making its form more solid. The scales around the wound became fully visible, showing angry purple lines spreading from the injury. Jack gathered his medical supplies, grateful for his basic xenobiology training. I'm going to give you something for the pain first, he explained, showing Nova the hypo spray. Then I'll remove the debris and treat the wound. Okay. Nova's eyes glowed brighter in response. Trust, Jack had learned, looked like purple light in Night Stalker eyes. As Jack worked to heal his alien friend, 3 more urgent messages from the Council flashed on his screen. He ignored them all. Sometimes, breaking protocol was the only right choice. Almost done, Jack murmured as he carefully extracted the debris, a piece of metal about the size of his thumb. You've been carrying this around for a while, haven't you? No wonder you sought shelter. Nova made a soft harmonic sound, its scales rippling gently under Jack's hands. The pattern spoke of pain, but also relief. Just as Jack was finishing the treatment, his screen lit up again. This time, it wasn't just Administrator Blue. The entire council was calling an emergency session. Warning, the station's AI announced. Multiple ships detected entering the sector. Military signatures detected. Nova's head snapped up, its body tensing. The darkness in the room deepened as the creature's instincts kicked in. Easy, Jack said, placing a gentle hand on Nova's side. I won't let them hurt you. You came here for help, and that's exactly what you're going to get. He looked at the approaching ships on his scanner and set his jaw. Even if I have to fight the entire Galactic Council to do it. Nova's scales shifted, creating a pattern Jack had never seen before. It looked almost like stars scattered across a night sky. Beautiful and somehow hopeful. The military ships hung in space like dark stars, surrounding the research station. Inside, Jack worked frantically at his computer, trying to make sense of the patterns Nova was creating with light and shadow. "One more time," he said, adjusting his sensors. "Show me your word for home." Nova created a complex pattern of swirling lights, accompanied by a harmonic hum that made the air vibrate at specific frequencies. Jack's computer captured both the visual and audio data, adding them to his growing translation matrix. "Got it," Jack exclaimed. "The pattern always has 7 points, and the sound contains the same base frequency. You're not just making pretty lights, it's a real language." Nova's eyes glowed brighter, and it created another pattern. This one Jack had learned meant yes or correct. Over the past week, they had developed a basic communication system. Colors meant emotions, patterns were words, and harmonics added context. "Sir," the station's AI interrupted, "the military vessels are demanding access. They threaten to breach if we don't comply within 1 hour." Jack looked at Nova, who was now creating a complex series of patterns. The translation matrix worked to decode them. "Many ships, like mine, hidden," Jack read aloud. "Wait, there are more Night Stalkers out there. Hiding." Nova's patterns became more urgent. The computer translated: hunted, feared, not understood, family scattered. "You're refugees," Jack realized. "Your species isn't hunting other races. You're running from them." The patterns Nova created next were so complex that Jack's computer took several minutes to process them. The story that emerged broke his heart. The Night Stalkers were an ancient species, evolved to use light and shadow as both communication and defense. Their ability to absorb light and seem to disappear had made other species fear them. When Night Stalkers approached to try communication, their natural appearance caused panic. After too many violent responses, they had gone into hiding, scattered across the galaxy in small groups. The mining colony, the research station. "You weren't attacking them, were you?" Jack asked. "You were trying to make contact." Nova's patterns showed sadness, deep blues and purples swirling slowly. "Tried to help. Saw danger in mines. Tried to warn. They fought. We left." Jack ran his hands through his hair in frustration. All this time, the galaxy has been terrified of a species that just wants to talk. A loud clang echoed through the station. The military ships were attaching docking clamps. 20 minutes until forced entry, the AI announced. Jack stood up straight, determination filling his face. "Nova, I need you to help me. We're going to show them the truth, but I need to understand more about your people. Can you teach me your full language? Not just basic patterns, but everything." Nova's form shifted, becoming more defined. Its patterns began changing rapidly, but now Jack could see the structure in them. Each movement was deliberate, each light pulse meaningful. It wasn't random beauty. It was literature, science, history, all written in light and shadow. For the next 15 minutes, Jack's computer recorded everything while he took frantic notes. Nova showed him patterns that meant mathematics, patterns that told stories, patterns that explained the complex physics of how Night Stalkers manipulated light itself. 5 minutes until breach, the AI warned. Jack looked at his notes, and then at Nova. "They're coming to capture or kill you, but they're going to find something very different instead." He smiled. "They're going to find the first human Night Stalker diplomatic meeting in history." Nova created a pattern Jack had never seen before, a mix of starlight and flowing shadows that his computer translated as friend. "Yeah," Jack said softly. "Friends. Now, let's go make history and change some minds about what it means to be a monster." The station shook as the first airlock began to open. The airlock doors opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Armed soldiers in heavy space armor poured into the station, their weapons trained ahead of them. Leading them was a tall, gray-skinned alien commander whose armor bore the markings of the Galactic Security Force. Jack stood calmly in the main laboratory, his hands raised to show he was unarmed. "Welcome to Research Station Beta 17. I'm Jack Thompson, lead cynobiologist." "Where is the creature?" the commander demanded, his translator making his voice sound metallic and harsh. "If you mean my friend," Jack said carefully, "they're right here." He gestured to the seemingly empty space beside him. Nova slowly appeared, its form condensing from shadow into its preferred shape. Several soldiers stumbled backward, their weapons shaking. The commander's finger tightened on his trigger. "Stop." Jack stepped between them and Nova. "They're not hostile. Look at my research. Look at the data. The Night Stalkers have been misunderstood for centuries." "Stand aside, human," the commander ordered. "This creature has killed hundreds." Nova created a pattern of light that Jack's computer quickly translated. The words appeared on screens around the laboratory. No deaths. Only fear. Only misunderstanding. The soldiers stared in shock as more words appeared. "We tried to warn mining colony. Saw structural weakness. Tried to evacuate them. They shot first. We left. Colony collapsed later." "Lies." The commander raised his weapon. "These beasts can't communicate." Jack's voice filled with anger. "Then how are they writing? Look around you. Every screen in this lab is showing their words. I've spent days documenting their language. They're not monsters. They're refugees." Nova moved forward slowly, its scales rippling with gentle patterns of blue and green. Peace colors, Jack had learned. The creature began creating more complex patterns in the air, telling their story in light and shadow. The commander fired. Jack didn't think. He moved. But Nova was faster. The creature wrapped around Jack protectively, its scales absorbing the energy blast completely. Then, instead of attacking, Nova redirected the energy into a beautiful display of dancing lights that filled the room. "Amazing," one of the younger soldiers whispered, lowering his weapon. "They can control energy itself." "Yes," Jack said eagerly. "Their abilities aren't weapons. They're tools for communication and protection. Watch." Nova created a series of patterns showing how they used their light-bending abilities to protect ships from solar flares, to detect structural weaknesses in buildings, to communicate across vast distances of space. Each demonstration was more beautiful than the last. More soldiers lowered their weapons, fascinated. Even the commander's stance began to waver. "Sir," the young soldier said, "I think we should listen. This changes everything we thought we knew." The commander looked from Jack to Nova, then at the continuing display of peaceful communication. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. "You have 1 hour," he said gruffly. "Show me your research. Prove what you're saying." Jack grinned. "I'll do better than that." "Nova, would you call your family?" Nova's eyes brightened. The creature turned toward the station's windows and released a pulse of light so brilliant it lit up the darkness of space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, lights began appearing in the void. Dozens of them. Beautiful patterns of living starlight. Each one a night stalker emerging from hiding. "That's impossible," the commander breathed. "There are so many. A whole civilization," Jack said softly, "not hiding to hunt, but hiding from being hunted. Until now." He turned to the commander. "So, should I start my presentation with their mathematical achievements, or would you prefer to learn about their poetry first?" Nova created a pattern that Jack now recognized as laughter, and for the first time in centuries, a Night Stalker family emerged from the shadows to finally be seen for what they truly were. The great chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as Jack Thompson stepped onto the speaking platform. Behind him, Nova moved like a living shadow, its presence causing a ripple of nervous whispers among the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. "Distinguished members of the Council," Jack began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "A week ago, you called me a fool for staying on my station. Today, I'm here to show you the greatest discovery in recent galactic history." Administrator Blue stood up, his blue skin pale with concern. "Human Thompson, you bring a deadly predator into these sacred chambers." "No," Jack said firmly. "I bring a friend, a scholar, and a representative of an ancient civilization." He gestured to the large screens surrounding the chamber. "Nova, would you show them?" The darkness beside Jack shifted, and suddenly the chamber filled with patterns of light so complex and beautiful that several council members gasped. Mathematical equations danced in the air, followed by star charts more detailed than any in the council's database. "The Night Stalkers," Jack explained, "are masters of light and energy. What we thought was hunting behavior was actually their written language. Those attacks on our facilities, attempts to warn us of dangers their advanced sensors had detected." Nova created a detailed recreation of the mining colony disaster, showing how they had detected structural weaknesses and tried to evacuate the miners. The light show continued, revealing centuries of misunderstood encounters. "Impossible," one council member muttered. "Such precision with light manipulation." "Not impossible," Jack said. "Watch this." He pulled up his research data. "Nova, show them the physics problem we solved yesterday." The Night Stalker created a complex pattern that resolved itself into a three-dimensional model of quantum mechanics that made several scientific advisors lean forward in amazement. "Their understanding of light and energy surpasses our own," Jack continued. "They can detect solar flares before our best equipment, predict structural failures, and communicate across vast distances of space, and they've been trying to share this knowledge with us for centuries." A tall reptilian council member rose. "If what you say is true, why have they hidden for so long?" Nova's patterns shifted, and Jack's translation matrix converted them to words on the screens. "Fear breeds fear. When we approached, others attacked. Easier to hide than watch more death. Until we met Jack. First one to stay. First one to listen." The chamber erupted in discussion. Jack watched as council members argued, pointed, and stared at Nova's continuing display of knowledge and art. Then, from the highest tier of the chamber, the council elder spoke. "Human Thompson," the elder's ancient voice cut through the chaos, "you claim these creatures are not just intelligent, but civilized. Yet we have no proof beyond lights and shadows." Jack smiled. "I thought you might say that." He looked at Nova. "Ready to introduce your family?" Nova's eyes glowed bright purple, and suddenly the chamber's great windows turned dark. But it wasn't empty space they were seeing. Dozens of Night Stalkers emerged from their light-bending camouflage, each one creating their own unique patterns of light. "By the stars," the elder whispered. "This is a small group," Jack said. "They're scientists, artists, historians, all waiting to share their knowledge. All they ask is a chance to be understood rather than feared." The patterns outside merged into one massive display, showing the history of the Night Stalker civilization. Their achievements in science, their art, their peaceful philosophy of knowledge sharing, all written in living light against the canvas of space. The council elder slowly stood, eyes fixed on the magnificent display. "Human Thompson, it seems we owe both you and the Night Stalkers an apology." The elder turned to face the chamber. "Let it be recorded that on this day, the Galactic Council acknowledges the Night Stalker civilization as a peaceful and advanced species, worthy of full membership in our community." Nova's joy expressed itself in a burst of rainbow light that danced across the chamber, and for the first time in the council's history, applause broke out among its members. 3 months after the historic council meeting, Research Station Beta 17 had transformed. What was once a lonely outpost now buzzed with activity as scientists from across the galaxy worked alongside Night Stalker scholars. At the center of it all, Jack Thompson stood before a window, watching Nova teach a group of human researchers about Night Stalker light language. "Your pronunciation is improving," Nova's patterns translated on Jack's tablet. The creature had developed a fondness for gentle teasing. "Only 3 light frequencies off this time." One of the human scientists laughed as she tried again, her light projector creating a wobbly but recognizable pattern. The Night Stalkers had shared their technology, allowing other species to participate in their light speech. Dr. Thompson. The station's AI interrupted. Administrator Blue is requesting entry for the monthly progress review. Jack smiled. The same administrator who had once called the Night Stalkers death itself now championed their integration into galactic society. Let him in. Blue entered, his skin a happy shade of turquoise. Human Thompson. The Council is thrilled with the progress reports. 17 new trade agreements with Night Stalker communities this month alone. Nova created a pattern showing trade routes spreading across the galaxy like a web of light. Other Night Stalkers had emerged from hiding, each bringing unique knowledge and skills. Their ability to detect structural weaknesses had already prevented 3 major space station disasters. And that's just the beginning, Jack said, pulling up his latest research. Nova's family group has been teaching us about their solar flare prediction techniques. We're looking at a revolution in space travel safety. A young Night Stalker, one of Nova's cousins, darted into the room. Its patterns showed excitement. Ships approaching. The education delegation is here. Jack checked his schedule. Ah, right. The first group of non-human students arriving to learn Night Stalker physics. He turned to Blue. Care to join the welcome party? They made their way to the observation deck. Outside, ships from a dozen worlds were docking. Each carried students and scientists eager to learn from the species they had once feared. Nova created a welcome message in massive letters of light, visible to all approaching vessels. Did you ever imagine this? Blue asked, watching a group of his own people excitedly greeting a Night Stalker teacher. When you decided to stay that day? Jack thought back to that moment of choice, when fear could have driven him to the escape pod. I hoped for understanding. But this. He gestured at the scene before them. Night Stalkers and other species working together, sharing knowledge, building friendships. This is better than I imagined. Nova's patterns swirled playfully, all because one human was too stubborn to run away. Too curious, Jack corrected with a grin. There's a difference. A small commotion drew their attention. One of the younger Night Stalkers had created a light show for some children, turning their physics lesson into an interactive game. The kids' laughter mixed with the harmonic hum of Night Stalker speech. The Council has a new proposal, Blue said, watching the scene. They want to establish a permanent human Night Stalker cultural exchange program. With you as its director, of course. Jack looked at Nova. What do you think, friend? Ready to teach the galaxy how to speak in light? Nova's response was to create a pattern so beautiful it brought tears to eyes of every species capable of crying. A symbol of hope, friendship, and the endless possibilities that arose when fear gave way to understanding. I'll take that as a yes, Jack said softly. Outside the station's windows, more ships arrived daily. Inside, light and shadow danced together as ancient knowledge found new voices. And in the heart of it all, a human and a Night Stalker continued to prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't a predator or a monster, but the assumption that different meant dangerous. The story of their friendship would be told for generations, written in light across the stars, a reminder that understanding could bridge any darkness, if only someone was brave enough to stay and listen.